Welcome to Forever Fierce. I am Catherine Grace O'Connell, and I am delighted to introduce my guest today. Jennifer Dulski is the head of groups and community at Facebook. As the former president of Change.org, Jen's book, coming out today, is Purposeful. Are you a manager or a movement starter? According to Jen, managers accept the world as it is, while movement starters push the boundaries to make it more just, compassionate, and even joyful. We all need to decide, are we managers or movement starters? Purposeful is a guidebook that will give you the steps on how you can turn your mission into a movement that creates change. Jen believes that anyone can spark change if they believe in the power of taking action, no matter where, how small they start. She believes in ordinary people doing extraordinary things. She believes in why not you? Welcome, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So delighted to have you here. So in your belief system, anyone can be a leader, regardless of age, background, gender, anything.
That's right. So I've been very fortunate in my career to have really a front row seat to not only witnessing, but getting to support people who start movements of all kinds. I saw it at change.org. I see it every day in people who build communities on Facebook. And these are sometimes really unexpected people. I've seen everyone from children to grandparents start their own movements. And to me, what that shows me is that anyone can do this.
Yeah, your book shares incredible diversity of stories. I mean, really, whether or not you come from, say, the Middle East and want to make a change around wearing the hijab, is that right?
Yeah.
Hijab, which is incredible, or a teenager really impacting Gatorade. I mean, share one of, I know there's so many stories. Do you have a favorite story? I guess that's a hard one.
I don't. The hardest part actually was narrowing it down to the stories that ended up being in the book. And I actually did a whole number of interviews that didn't make it in the end. And I'll try to share those stories in other ways on LinkedIn or in our Facebook group. But there are so many wonderful stories. As you mentioned, one of the ones that comes to mind is this woman named Manal Rostam. She actually had a life-altering experience when she was 19. She was on a tour bus, and she switched seats with her cousin on the bus. And then 5 minutes later, the bus got in a horrible accident and rolled over, and Manal was injured but ended up surviving, and her cousin with whom she had switched seats passed away in that accident. And it really shook her to her core, and she ended up deciding to wear the hijab a couple years later as a sign of gratitude and a sign of closeness to her faith. But she faced a bunch of stereotypes and discrimination. And so in an effort to find other people with whom she could connect around this topic, she started this Facebook group called Surviving Hijab. And she invited, a few dozen friends of hers to it. And over the past couple years, this group has grown to 500,000 women, all talking and supporting each other around the day-to-day issues they face as hijabi women. And the movement she was able to start is not only this community, but she was able to persuade a multinational company to step forward for women who wear the hijab. And in this case, got Nike to launch a new line of athletic wear called Nike Pro Hijab for Muslim women athletes.
It's such a powerful story and representative of, like you said, the wide range of stories that you share in there. And you started that story by, she was in an accident that actually was very life-changing. How often do you see that connection with people who start movements?
Pretty often. So one of the things that often inspires people to start a movement is when they have some event in their personal life or in the life of someone that's close to them. So there's another story that I share in Purposeful about a man named Hank Hunt, who is a lovely man from Texas, grew up and was raised there, married 30 years and had several kids. And one day his daughter wasn't picking up her phone, and it ended up being a really tragic story where his daughter, Carrie, was actually murdered by her estranged husband in a motel room. And Hank's grandchildren, Carrie's children, were in that motel room on the other side of the bathroom wall. And his granddaughter tried to dial 911 and couldn't, because you need to dial 9 to get an outside line from a hotel room. And so unfortunately, Carrie died that night. But Hank dedicated himself, again, because of this story that happened in his life to someone he cared about, to making sure that no business, no hotel, no any other kind of business requires a 9 or any other number before dialing 911. And his movement, he started a petition on change.org. He got 600,000 people to sign it. And after a few years of really dedicated effort, just this year, that law was passed and President Trump signed it into law.
That was a heartbreaking story, and also I think brought to light, I don't know how many of us have actually thought about not being able to call 911 from a hotel room.
It's so true. And I will tell you, I was telling you before that I actually recorded the audio version of the book recently, and I cried telling that story. It's just such a moving story. And it is true that sometimes people can take their most difficult moments of struggle and turn them into something positive. And as we all know, the more willing you are to be vulnerable and really share your story, the more likely other people are to rally behind you.
Yeah, the story is so powerful. Like you said, it brings up a lot of emotion. The description of this young girl who's feeling so helpless and doing everything she's been told to do.
Yeah, he tells this story about her sitting on his lap in the police department, and he said she just kept looking back and forth, eye to eye, and saying, I did what I was supposed to do, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, it was really heartbreaking. So in the foreword of your book, you have some amazing women, men writing testimonials. Simon Sinek, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. I think a lot of people are. And the why. Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. Are people buying belief?
This is when I think about the difference between vision and purpose. This is how I talk about it. So a vision that you have is your desired future for the world, what you want the world to look like. But purpose is why that vision matters to you. And a vision without a purpose is insufficient. That's why these stories really make a difference, and that is what causes people to believe in your vision.
And you say purpose is contagious. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I think people, again, the best way to make your purpose contagious is to share a story about it. But I often describe movements as kind of like standing ovations. It takes one kind of courageous person to stand up and clap and say, I really believe in this thing. But as soon as a couple other people join that person, then all of a sudden it's a movement and everyone is standing up and clapping. And so that your purpose, if you're brave enough to share it and brave enough to share a story, can often really catch on and have other people follow.
Yeah, I think there was a really powerful video that was done by one of the maybe TED organizers or someone who worked by TED.
One of my favorite videos.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, Derek Sivers in his TED Talk, which I mentioned.
Yeah.
He shows this video of a very brave or potentially intoxicated man dancing at a concert, really going all out. And he's dancing by himself for quite a little while. And then one other person gets up to join him. And as soon as you have your first follower, you have the potential for a movement. And one of the things I talk about in Purposeful is about how important it is to treat your first followers well, to think about them as kindling for your fire, and to make sure you understand them, take care of them, encourage them, because they too can become leaders of your movement along with you.
Well, you talk about the analogy of movement and hosting a cocktail party. The person, which I love. I think that really puts it in very relatable terms. So please share the philosophy around that, because I think a lot of people.
So I learned this from Katerina Fake, who's one of the co-founders of Flickr. And she would say to me, starting any community and certainly starting any movement is like hosting a cocktail party. And if you want to have a successful party, when you invite people over, you take their coat, you welcome them, you introduce them to other people, make sure they're having a good time. If you see conflict break out, you interrupt and make sure things stay on a positive note. And you know this as the leader of a community. We also see this being true in terms of people who start and lead groups on Facebook. The best, most successful communities are the ones that have great hosts, people who really take care of their members of their community.
Well, I think it's the personal connection. I think that really makes a difference. And you just brought up something interesting, conflict. So we live in a world where there's a lot of division, a lot of conflict, and anytime you stand up and challenge the status quo, you're going to attract what you refer to as sort of haters and trolls, but you use a tool of positivity to transform that, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, that's true. I think so. There's a lot of things to think about when you look at criticism. And this is a topic I really enjoyed writing about because it isn't written about very much. And it is becoming increasingly common in the age of social media. You can both mobilize people around you more quickly. You also can attract haters more quickly. And I like to separate criticism into two categories. The first is, it's true, there are people who will just want to take you down a notch, who will criticize you because of the way you look or your gender or any other things that you can't control. And those people I bucket into haters and trolls. And then the second category is people who give you feedback about what you're doing or how you're doing it. And even when it's not presented in the most gentle way, that kind of feedback can be really valuable. And I talk about how to think about using that to your advantage. The positivity piece has to do with even haters and trolls become that way for a reason. Like nobody is born hateful of other people. And usually when you try to understand what's underneath it, really it comes from usually a lack of feeling understood, a sense of feeling alone. And so there's a strategy in the book I talk about called the bear hug, which is the idea of treating your haters with an extra dose of love and understanding. And there's a story there about a particular person in Spain who decided that he wanted to spam us at change.org. He was concerned that someone could put fake signatures on a petition, and so he started putting fake signatures and taking pictures of this and then tweeting it out, saying it was possible. Now, we did remove those signatures fairly quickly. Our tools did that. But it is possible for a split second to do something like that and take a photo. And we were getting a lot of heat from this. And I think many people on our team said, let's fight, tech with tech. Let's, raise the stakes. Let's look at his IP address and so forth. And our then head of comms, a guy named Benjamin Jaffe-Walt, who goes by BJW, he said, let's try the bear hug. Like, what if we just try to understand what it is that's bothering him? And he suggested that he fly to Spain and talk to him directly, which I think even for me at the time was very unusual. You just
outside the box,
wouldn't see that approach at most kind of large tech companies. But I said, well, it's worth a shot. We flew BJW to Spain. He went out to the tiny island where this man lived, and he just listened to him. And it turns out that, he had this belief that this was what could happen. And when BJW explained the way our system works and how we caught bulk signatures and so forth, he felt much better. And before you know it, I was getting photos back of the two of them in a bar with their arms around each other, and he stopped spamming us. And all it took was a little bit of understanding.
I think that's really powerful. I know one of the missions I have in the Forever Fierce Revolution is to shift a paradigm and shift a perception. We did a campaign this fall called Bridging the Gap, where we united 100 millennial influencers and 100 midlife and beyond influencers, really from 20 to 80. And the idea was to bring them together so they could hear each other's stories and really connect through their hearts so that perceptions would naturally fall away. Isn't that the genius?
I love that idea. And I really do believe in this. And we see it happening also on Facebook a lot because people come together over something they have in common. And then they realize the things that are different about them and they learn to appreciate them. And it's interesting. I had an experience myself a little bit like this the other day because we had a group of pastors come in to meet us at Facebook and talk about how to build community. And I'm Jewish. And even though I've gone to many different, houses of worship and so forth, they were all there. And it was actually a difficult day for me because my daughter's school was in lockdown that day. It was after the Parkland shooting, and there was something in our area that made the police nervous, and so they locked down the school, and I was really nervous about it. And I mentioned it in this meeting with them, and they said, "Can we pray for you?" And I thought, this is not my religion, but is this a moment to be open-minded and say, maybe I should see how other people operate in the world? And I said yes, and they held hands, and it was probably 24 pastors from around the country, and they bowed their heads and they prayed, and it was all I could do to keep from sobbing in that meeting. It was so emotional And it just showed me how much you can learn to appreciate when you are open your mind and your heart to other people.
That's a powerful experience. And speaking of your daughter, there's another story about your daughter. When you were, I believe it was working at Yahoo.
Yes.
And you got a call, and you said in the book, I think it was one of your most difficult stories too, and how it taught you really, you learned what empathy and compassion in leadership were through that experience. And then obviously, so please share that story if you're comfortable.
Yeah, this is a tough story. This is another one when if you get the audiobook,
yeah,
I cry a lot.
I know. Especially when you experience it. It's
yeah, so I was at a work offsite with my team. We were at a winery in the mountains, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and I got that call that you never want to get, which was from my daughter's school saying she had an accident on the playground. She got knocked over, and yeah, the worst moment, my husband actually went to pick her up. They didn't call an ambulance for some reason, which in retrospect we should have, but he put her on the phone with me. And that was probably the worst single moment of my life. I could just hear in her voice, she was moaning. She couldn't understand what I said. And I knew something was very seriously wrong. And she ended up having traumatic brain injury and ended up in an induced coma for about just over a week. And we didn't know during that time what would happen. And everything just gets put instantly in perspective about what matters in life. And it taught me so much, not only about perspective for my own life and gratitude for my own family and all the privileges that I have, but also taught me what others might be going through. And as a leader of a team or as a leader of a movement, one of the things that's helpful to realize is that people all around us may be going through those moments at any time, and it's really important to be aware of that. And actually, the reason that the book came about in the first place is because I was giving a talk at a conference in London, and the talk was on the topic of the future of work. And I was making this point about how our lives are so inextricably intertwined between work and life. And I wanted to make this point, so I asked the audience, I had a list of about 5 questions that I was planning to ask the audience, and thinking that by the time I got to the end of the list, maybe some majority of the audience would be standing up to make the point. And the first question I asked was, how many of you have ever received serious medical news about yourself or a loved one while you were at work? And about 80% of the audience stood up on that first question. I was so caught off guard, and you could see they were too. It was one of those moments where it just shakes you and you say, oh my gosh, like this could be happening to any of us on any day. And we just kind of let it sit there while people looked around at each other. And it was the realization not only that we should be more compassionate, but that we had so much more in common than we realized.
That's beautiful. And you talk about the power of vulnerability and compassion and empathy in really creating leaders, and also that anyone can be a leader, because the truth is we really all have those qualities inside of us, don't we?
We do. And the basic things that it takes to do this: willingness to share your story, the courage to be the first to stand up and clap, the willingness to ask for help, honestly, because movement starters don't do this by themselves. They ask for help from people around them. The creativity to think about how to persuade decision makers. Like, these are skills we all have. My hope with the book is that I can give people some tips and techniques they can use, and also some other stories to inspire them. But everything you have is within you already.
And you say something which I think is really, again, very relatable. We're all beginners. It's a dirty little secret we don't really talk about, right? But every day, be it starting a movement or a new job, every day we're really kind of just making it up, aren't we?
It's true. And the thing is, we know this so deeply about ourselves, and it's easy to say, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous because I've never done this before. But what we forget is that is also true of everyone else. So I think about this like when I first joined a public company board, and I walked into that boardroom, and I think we all know, public company boards tend to be not very diverse in terms of gender or age, for that matter. And so in this case, I was one of very few women, and I was also about 20 years younger than everyone else on the board. And I was super nervous because I had never done it before. And I took a moment just to say to myself, everybody else had a first day too. Mm-hmm. Like, they might have been older than me, they might have been a man, but they had a first day on this board too, and they know what that's like. And probably because of that, they will cut me a little bit of slack. I can cut the next person a little bit of slack if we remember this.
That's beautiful. And you talk about fear of failure, that everyone, that's a pretty universal thing. People see you as fearless, but it's not necessarily, right? It's not, it's, you take one step toward that fear every day.
That's right. It's funny. So I hear other entrepreneurs sometimes talk about fearlessness being a key part of being an entrepreneur, and I just completely disagree. I don't think you have to be fearless. I think you have to be courageous, because you have to, it's okay to be afraid, and moving forward anyway is the thing that makes this work. And the technique I've tried to use is to do lots of things that scare me. And the more things I can do that are scary, the less scary everything else becomes in comparison.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Exactly. And that might vary for different people. I sometimes, this story isn't in the book, but I was afraid of flying for a while. And so one of my friends convinced me to go out in one of those glider planes, which have no engine. I just thought, well,
I had a brother who crashed those.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Gosh. I'm glad I didn't know that in advance. But I was okay, well, if I can fly in a plane with no engine, then maybe a plane with an engine will feel less scary. And there's lots of examples like that.
Is that psychology desensitization, I think is what it's called, something like that. Oh, my goodness. Right. Well, I think that's, there's another metaphor you use about climbing mountains. And people think of it as like, we reach the summit and then we're kind of done. We don't really reach the summit and we're done. What do we see from there?
Yeah, you see the next summit that is yet to climb.
Exactly, and we all have.
That's true. I think the other thing about mountains is that sometimes I say, sometimes they're sunny and you brought a picnic lunch and you can see the top and it looks awesome. And other days it's super stormy and you're back at the very bottom. And the key, I think, to success here is just remembering that there will be both those days. So you're not surprised when it's cloudy and you just keep climbing, and it will get sunny again if you just keep going up that mountain.
Isn't that the truth? And you're big again on focusing on positivity. There was one great tool you used, being president of change.org, and these petitions. And if somebody was having maybe a negative experience or down day, they would go over to that change petition and see all the positive. I thought that was brilliant.
It was really surprising to me, actually, when I learned this. So I went out to go do these interviews for the book, and I met a woman named Myrna Forster, who was the woman who persuaded Canada to put the first woman who was not the queen on the banknote of Canada. And she won this campaign. It took several years. And she said, people were kind of mean to me, like on social media, and sometimes she talked about radio talk shows she did, and people weren't always that friendly. And she would go back to her petition and she would read the comments. So when people sign a campaign, they can put a reason for signing. And not only did she go back and read these, she printed them out and she carried them around with her all the time. So she could always go back and remind herself. And I think it's such a good technique, because there is lots of positivity around us. And I'm sure you see this in your community too.
I do. Yeah. I use that tool, which I thought was brilliant, because there are days when I have, some people coming in. Anytime you stand up against, for something, you're going to have people basically trying to bring you down. So I will go into the community and I will just read through the positive comments, or in my Facebook Messenger, or emails I got from women saying that, their lives changed from this, and it'll lift me, because we all need those moments to be lifted.
Such a good idea. I'm glad to hear you do that.
Yeah, thank you. Jen, life-threatening illness can teach us a lot. Empathy, compassion, it's a great equalizer. You have a story about your mother, and I want to read something from your book. You said, "I'm very lucky to have the parents I have. My father was one of those dads who believed we could do anything. My mother got her MBA at night and has real grit. She interviewed 50 times before she got a job out of business school and ultimately became an extremely successful partner at an HR consulting firm. She also had cancer early in her life. Half of her face is paralyzed. So you can imagine what she's gone through to be as successful as she is. So I'd love for you to share that, but then also your own story. You had, talk about an equalizer and a parallel experience in your 20s.
Yeah, very surprising. So my mom, she had cancer in her 20s, and she was very lucky to survive, and I think she feels quite grateful for her life, but half of her face was paralyzed in that surgery. And as I say, like, I've just never known her to look any other way. So that's always been my mom, and I think she's beautiful. And but I've seen lots of people stare and point and things like that. And if you think about it, as a woman in the 70s, she changed careers. She went to school, business school at night. As I said, she was a woman. She had a physical disability. She's only maybe 4'11". So like all the things were kind of not in her favor. And she just stuck it out and did it anyway. And then she has been really, really successful. And so she was a great role model for me in so many ways. And then, yes, I ended up having a bizarrely parallel experience when I was in my late 20s. I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, which I found out one day at work. Speaking about getting bad medical news at work, that was not a good day in a glass conference room at Yahoo. Luckily, it was a benign tumor, so I had surgery for it and later radiation, but it didn't kill me. And while I remember being so scared and, so upset about it, I also remember being really grateful because I just knew it could be worse. And there's so many people who have to deal with so much worse. And so for me, it's always been really important to keep that sense of perspective.
It's powerful. And your mom taught you sort of this lesson of not why me, but why not me?
My mom always said, why not me? Like if something needs to be done, she was going to do it. And that is true in so many ways. She's invented different programs at organizations she's been a part of. They also adopted. I have a third sister who, joined our family in her teens. And my parents said, why not us? Shouldn't we be welcoming to someone new to our family?
You learned about the experience of someone from a different race through that experience, correct?
That's right. My sister is Black and had a pretty different life experience, although we had gone to the same schools, so we had some similarities and some things that made us different, and learning about that from each other has been really amazing. And, she's ended up coming to many bar and bat mitzvahs in our family, and we've learned about her experience both from talking to her directly about it and also traveling with her around the world and seeing, you really do see how people get treated differently, and getting a kind of firsthand look to that perspective has been really eye-opening.
More and more compassion, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Incredible. So you talk to a lot about work and then outside of work, and also that balance, which I think our audience can relate to, is kind of BS.
Yes.
Right? Is there really anything?
I don't believe in work-life balance. And actually, I wrote an article once called Work-Life Balance is Bull, which I wanted to title Work-Life Balance is Bullshit. But I think I published it in Fortune, and they were not a fan of that. But I think the concept of balance isn't realistic. The idea that you could perfectly balance two things and that they would always be, equal sides of each other. I just don't think that's the way work and life work anymore. And so I call it the work-life mashup, which, I think here is like maybe a music term, but in tech, it's a tech term of like two things that are overlapping on each other. And that's what's worked for me personally. And I say, I am still a mom when I walk into work every day. And if I get that call from school, I will answer it, and that will be the most important thing. And I'm still a leader of a company when I walk home into, dinner or whatever else. And I may try not to answer those phone calls, but if something really blows up, I might do that too. And that's the mashup.
You're going to bring home to work and work to home, because we blend the two.
Right.
I think that's very realistic. You were a student teacher in a program called Breakthrough. And I think, again, back to this balance or non-balance thing, it taught you a lot about, I remember it's very visceral, picturing this note that you carried around, this list of, I need like 9 items, the next day it's 12 items, next day it's 15 items, because you worked until 9 at night. And again, I think our audience can really relate to this. So please share that experience.
Yeah, this was really early in my career, and I just, I was working so hard, and yes, I had this piece of paper I used to carry around with me of items I needed at the drugstore, which closed at 9 p.m., And I would just take the list back and forth every day because I never left work before 9, which, as it turns out, is not a great idea. And I had a wonderful woman, probably about the same age as I am now, who was my program officer. And she came to visit my program kind of to review it. And she said, Jen, why are you staying till 9 at night every night? And I said, well, my team wants to stay and I need to be here if they're here. And she said, no, your team doesn't need to stay. And she taught me this process of really rigorously prioritizing our work based on our mission. And I think this is really important for movement starters because it's very easy to get caught up in all the things we think need to be done when really, if we have a core mission, there's only a few things that are critically important.
And I think it's probably one of those, at least for me, being a movement starter, it means that you have this heart that just gets tugged.
Yes.
I know for me initially it was like that phone pinging every second and I'd have to go to this person or that person until I realized, I wrote a post about it recently about what I learned about self-love because I can't save the world if I keep letting myself go down. And at one point, the balance was completely gone and I had to bring it back.
Yeah, and one of the ways that I see people do that is by bringing in other people to help them. So maybe you certainly can't personally save the world, but together with your army of supporters, you probably can. And one of the things I think people don't do enough is trust the people around them. And so it's hard sometimes to let go and let others help or let others step up to lead. But that's where the real magic comes from.
There's a 90-10 rule, right?
Yes,
you follow, right?
That's
exactly.
right. I say people you work with should be able to make 90% of their own decisions. And if they're not, then either you're micromanaging them or you're asking them to do things they shouldn't be asked to do.
And anytime you start a movement, like you said, there's this sort of ripple effect and the other people have to come in. But a movement doesn't just transform the leader into a leader. It transforms people, like you said, these other people actually into leaders. And I'm seeing that in my own community.
Yeah, tell me about that a little more.
I have seen women that have literally stepped into these positions that they thought they could never do in a million years and are killing it. And then have later on messaged me or emailed me and told me they were in the depths of despair, depression, couldn't function. Then they found the community. Then they stepped into a volunteer role. And then they were leading, like I've got a woman who's a major leader in there who could barely function 6 months ago. And now she's killing it. And I cannot tell you story after story. A woman in our community who's, she and her children were actually held at gunpoint by her husband who committed suicide in front of them and just obliterated their lives. And now she launched a blog. She's writing a book. She's a huge leader in our community and on our team. Just transforming these experiences into something positive.
It's so true. And I mean, I agree completely that it is the power of believing in people really goes so far. And so you giving her that chance to join the community and then take on more and more leadership, it just makes such a difference. And I tell a story about another, because we see this happening on Facebook all the time. It's, the power of having high expectations of people can help them really reach those expectations. And there's research actually from Jack Zenger and Folkman who they actually look at people's performance reviews and they say, when you believe people are awesome, it actually makes them more awesome. And so we see this happening, example after example. And there's one about a woman named Jennifer Cardenas who started this group in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. And I
love that story.
Yeah, she started this group and, grew to 150,000 people in 3 days.
She went to bed and it was like...
Yeah, she went to dinner and it was 800 people.
Yeah, it was crazy.
She went to bed, it was 30,000 people. And then all of a sudden there's hundreds of thousands. And, she was the leader of this community, but then she lost internet service because she went back into the zone of the hurricane. And all of these people stepped up as leaders.
It was like 80 people you said or something.
Memory.
And then they
80
saved
people from all over the world. They saved 8,000 people in Hurricane Harvey.
It's amazing what happens when somebody actually stands up.
Right. And she stood up to started it, but she could never have done that by herself.
Neither could I.
Right.
Trust me. I'm surrounded by an incredible team and they put boundaries up now around me. They'll be like, if you're overdoing it, and they'll put boundaries. You're gonna basically a timeout, a healthy timeout.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
I really
Your team knows you well.
Yeah. And one thing, 3 years ago, I only had a dog following me, not thousands of women around the world. And the only way I could do that was through Facebook and these community groups, which I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
So I know we have women in our audience, many women that have a passion inside of them and may not know that they're leaders and can lead a movement. So please share with them, what action steps can they take and how can they use Facebook and community groups to start their own movement?
Well, I think the steps are basic. As I said, the first step is just having a little bit of courage. That first small action really makes a difference. And in some cases, it might be starting a Facebook group. In other cases, it might be starting a petition. Any small action can really matter. It might be starting a blog, some of the other things you did. The second thing is about trying to rally that initial support. And so this is another scary part. Even like as I go out to talk about the book, one of the things I did was have to tell the people I know that I wrote a book in the first place. And it's uncomfortable, it's awkward, but that is the only way you start to get initial followers. And what's great about communities and other tools like Facebook groups is that they allow you not only to invite in that first set of people, but to have those people then help you grow it further. So we actually see there's a critically important set of people, we call them founding members of the group, which is people who join the groups in the first 3 days. And so if you start a community, making sure you work hard to invite those people in the first few days and giving them the reins to help you grow it from there can really make it successful.
You said treat them really well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Pull them into your inner circle.
Right. Think about what's in it for them too.
Now you have a series going up on Thrive Global.
Yes.
That I believe you just put the first one up maybe yesterday, the article on your book.
That's right. There's been a few posts before that.
I think, I haven't. I've seen other posts, but I don't know if I saw it about the book. So we have a mutual friend, Arianna Huffington. Arianna was a huge part of my finding my voice, believing in myself after sending her an email and her Arianna invited me to share my voice on the Huffington Post. And that was a turning point in my life. So please share your story about Arianna.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story. And yes, I met Arianna many years ago. And then recently, a few months ago, I went to visit her and I took her an early copy of the book. And one of the first things she did was scan the table of contents. And then she switched immediately to this epilogue section called You Never Know Whom You Might Inspire. And she just circled it. And it just made me think about how she is one of these people who inspires others. And I learned 2 key things when I was interviewing people about this book about inspiration, which is the first is that everybody has somebody that inspires them. And the second is they almost never tell them. And so I don't know to the degree to which you've told Arianna that she inspired you, but there are 2 things I encourage people to do. One is think about the actions and words that we say that might have an impact on others. Like that small action she took completely changed the trajectory of your life. And each of us may have those moments. And then the other thing is that we should just be reminded to thank the people who inspire us more often.
I think that's beautiful. We're all sort of planting seeds at all times, right?
Yeah. I'm sure we all have these moments where you can think back to those, I think about a particular professor who said, I think you maybe should publish this paper. And the same thing in reverse. I mean, I remember being told, geez, I don't think maybe you should take any more math. I mean, comments like that can really cut you to your core. And so these little small things that we say just make such a big difference.
There's a lot of research around that with teachers. If they project, like you said, positivity, you can change people's lives really outside in, can't you?
That's right.
Projecting belief.
Yes, it's called the Pygmalion effect.
You write about about the Pygmalion effect.
Yeah, basically,
and I love that
self-fulfilling prophecy that when you believe in people, they will perform better, even if it's set up in a fake experiment. It is true.
There's a lot of fake experiments that show you some pretty incredible things.
Exactly.
So it wasn't that long ago that I started this group, Forever Fierce Revolution, on Facebook, and it really was to shift a paradigm and to shift a perception of women at midlife and beyond. So Jen, you're 46. We see women out there. You talk about Brene Brown in your book, and Oprah, and Elizabeth Gilbert, and incredible women. Helen Mirren, Elon Musk's mother, May Musk, just breaking through incredible glass ceilings. So why do you think we still have a perception around older women, or at least that's been my experience and why I started what I started, because I saw so many women being treated differently just because they were older and not because of who they were on the inside.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your community, why you started it, how it has grown, and what you've seen it be able to do.
So this really started over a campaign that I came up with, an idea in a yoga class to initially unite, called the Fierce 50, to unite 50 bloggers over the age of 50 to create a collaborative, supportive community to celebrate one another and to role model something different for women. So we could show women supporting women instead of that kind of cultural cattiness that I don't understand competition. I never have. So from there, that went viral, and we ended up changing it to Forever Fierce because we had so many younger women say, hey, what about us? We're the sandwich generation. We're the Gen Xers. Like, nobody, we're kind of forgotten. So to me, midlife isn't an age. It's an experience. It's a time in a woman's life where the world starts treating her differently, or she starts feeling differently about herself. And I felt we needed support. So out of this community, we started a Facebook group called Forever Fierce, and then it became a movement. Then it became literally a revolution because we had so many women. It's global. Australia, the UK, Germany, Ireland, just about every single state, women everywhere, and we're watching it change their lives and bringing them back to life. And I call myself, I don't like the word influence, because I think influence has really turned into advertising to me in my experience. I call myself a catalyst. And you use this terminology in your book about sparking change from within. And that's what I like to do, is spark change, because I know what it did for me. And I want to be that spark, and then the other women are like kindling. And I watch sparks happening and lives changing from within.
That's right. And I mean, you have started a movement, and this is what will change perceptions, right? It's women coming to the forefront. This is exactly what I talk about when I say the difference between a manager and a movement starter, where managers say, well, we've done everything we can. It's too bad that it's that way. And movement starters say, what more could possibly be done? And that's what you're doing. And it's incredible to see how that will shift perception. And obviously, as a woman of this age, I don't see any lack of capability on my part, because I am of a certain age. In fact, I see more capability now that's come with more experience, both from work and honestly, from being a mother. And so I think the key thing is, how can we build this movement even further? How can we find the places to help people shine of all backgrounds? And that was the other incredible thing about interviewing these folks for the book, is they really are of all shapes, sizes, colors, ages, and the ability to be a movement starter doesn't discriminate.
It's ageless.
Yeah, it's ageless for sure.
Ageless. It's about passion, isn't it? Passion, purpose, joy, belief.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing I wanted to share, we talked about, I had a Facebook research team in my house recently, which is hilarious. Here I hadn't heard of Instagram, and my daughter's like, Mom, here's Instagram, what's a hashtag? And this was just 3 years ago. And I was really new, not to Facebook, but to this world. And it's pretty easy to learn. It's easy to learn Facebook. It's easy to learn how to use Facebook and technology to reach people globally, isn't it?
That's right. It is easier now to mobilize people than it ever has been before, and it's also easier to connect with people. So, there's a lot of research now on loneliness. It says loneliness is on the rise. It's deadlier than obesity. It's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And what I see now is that technology makes it easier than ever before to find those people who will make us feel less alone. So for you, it's been, women around the world who are at a certain age. I've seen, like, the things that people may feel are the most unusual about themselves. What technology does is let them find other people who have that. So there are groups for people who are adopted. There are groups for people who struggle with addiction. There are groups for every passion you think may be the most unusual, bizarre thing. There are people who do that. So there's a group for people who love chopping wood, who are, sourdough bread bakers. One of my favorite ones is actually called the Very Old Skateboarders.
Skateboarding, I love it.
It's my favorite. They're women in their 60s and 70s who love to skateboard. And people may look at them funny, but when they're all together, you know, this is who they are, and they found each other, and that has become their movement.
It's an awesome. I love that video. It came up, I think.
You saw it?
Yeah, I saw it. I mean, I saw it actually quite a while ago. Someone sent it to me because we're always about showing these inspiring things that women are doing, and I thought it was absolutely incredible. So what I'm hearing as a common theme is for people not to buy into these stories that are projected onto them. Don't buy into, I can't do this and I can't. I thought I couldn't. I didn't see myself as a leader.
Right. You make your own story.
Right.
We all make our own stories, and we can all be leaders. And if it's whatever it is that scares us is the thing we have to take head on. So if it's the technology that scares you, you know, find a younger person who's going to show you. There's courses for most of these things. You can learn almost anything on YouTube these days. My favorite story is my daughter when she got contacts and spent hours trying with the person in the store to learn how to put her contacts in.
That was me.
Crying. My husband tried to teach her crying. I said, take a break, just go up, take a break. She went to her room. She comes down 15 minutes later, smile ear to ear. I said, did you figure out how to put your contacts in? Yes, YouTube taught her how to put her contacts in.
Oh, that is so funny.
So it's there for all of us, and it isn't as scary as it seems.
One of the underlying themes of the fall campaign for Virginia Gap was called, I coined Reciprocal Mentorship. And that was one of the reasons of bringing these demographics together, because younger generations have incredible wisdom to teach us, and we have wisdom and life experience to share with them.
That's right. We launched a women's mentorship program at change.org called WHOA, Women Helping Others Achieve. And we originally planned to launch it mentees and mentors, and we sent out a survey and we asked how many people wanted to be a mentee and how many wanted to be a mentor. And 99% of people said they wanted to be a mentee, and only 6% of people said they wanted to be a mentor. And it was because people didn't feel like they had something.
That story again.
Exactly. And so what we did was we said, you know what? You're all mentors. We put them in co-mentorship pairs, very similar to what you did. They were all mixed in geography and age and so forth. We just said, you're all mentoring each other because you all have something to teach and you all have something to learn.
So we all have value.
Of course.
It's just what we tell ourselves.
Yeah. So we tell ourselves a lot of bad stories.
So it's time to tell ourselves some amazing stories.
Right.
So, and we want people to read this, talk about this story. We want people to read Purposeful. So let our audience know, where can they get Purposeful, and how can what you're really doing is starting a movement.
That's right. My movement is to try to encourage all of you to start your own movements, because what I realized is that the impact I can have as one individual person pales in comparison to the impact that all of you can have when you start your own movements like the one you've started. And as I said, my goal is to give people tips and advice. There is a website for the book called purposefulbook.com. It's also available on Amazon, of course. There's an Instagram account you can follow, Purposeful Book. We're in the process of setting up a Facebook group, which isn't ready yet, but will be shortly.
I could teach you.
Yeah, yeah, right. If I don't know how to do that, I'm in trouble. And so we'd love it. Yeah, and we will have extra resources available on the website too that go beyond what's in the book.
Fantastic. And follow the Thrive Global series, because you'll be sharing excerpts, and you've got them, I know, on LinkedIn.
Yes, on my LinkedIn page, I'm posting regular excerpts there too.
Exactly. And if you are a member of the Forever Fierce Revolution, you are lucky, because you'll be entered into a giveaway for 5 of Jen's books that are signed, personally signed by Jen.
Absolutely.
So amazing. So know out there that I didn't know I was a leader. I didn't know I could start a movement. I cannot tell you enough about using technology that's available, simple tools, groups on Facebook, to change your life and to change the lives of people around the world. You know, everyone has something they believe in, passion, purpose. Believe in yourself. You're not necessarily a manager. You may very well be a leader of a movement. You just don't know it. All right. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your 1 hour in LA to shoot to my house and on to Long Beach for another. That's the life of talk about the life of a leader, incredible woman.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. Cheers, beauties. Stay fierce.